What happens when a whisper of prejudice meets a Category 5 hurricane of power? You're about to find out. This isn't just a story about a viral video or a moment of injustice. This is the story of Dr. Esther Reed, a woman who controls a fortune larger than the GDP of some small countries. It's the story of Transatlantic Airways, an airline that picked a fight with the wrong passenger. And it's about a single cold-blooded command spoken from a cold jet bridge that vaporized $5 billion and sent an entire industry into a tailspin. Stay with me, because the karma in this story isn't just hard. It's a reckoning. The air in the first-class cabin of Transatlantic Airways, Flight 88, from New York's JFK to London Heathrow, had a specific curated smell. It was a blend of warm, leather-expensive perfume and the faint citrusy tang of the hot towels that had just been collected for Dr. Esther Reed. It was the smell of transition, a familiar olfactory boundary between one continent and the next. One multi-billion-dollar deal and another. At 46, Esther was a woman sculpted by relentless intellect and quiet discipline. She wasn't just the CEO of Ethelred Capital, she was Ethelred Capital. The firm which she had built from the ground up over 2 decades was a behemoth in the world of venture capital and private equity, a silent kingmaker in tech, biotech, and sustainable energy. Her name didn't often appear in the flashy headlines of financial magazines. She preferred it that way. In the circles that mattered, however, her name was spoken with a mixture of awe and trepidation. A nod from Esther Reed could turn a startup into a unicorn overnight. A shake of her head could wither a promising prospectus into dust. She settled into seat 2A, a spacious pod that was more of a personal suite than a simple chair. She had slipped off her Tom Ford blazer, revealing a simple but elegant silk blouse. Her movements were economical precise. She wasn't flamboyant. She was substantial. She acknowledged the flight attendant's offer of a pre-departure drink with a polite smile and a request for sparkling water with a slice of lime. The flight attendant, a woman in her late 40s with a name tag that read Brenda, returned with the water. There was a flicker of something in Brenda's eyes as she looked at Esther, a brief, almost imperceptible sizing up. It wasn't outright hostility, but it was a look Esther had seen 1,000 times before. It was the look that questioned her presence in a space like this. It was a look that tried to reconcile the image of a black woman with the unspoken assumptions of first class. Esther had learned long ago not to let it bother her. It was simply data, another variable in a world full of them. "Will you be needing anything else before we push back, ma'am?" Brenda asked. The ma'am was technically correct, but the tone was flat, stripped of the warmth she had lavished on the older white gentleman in 3C. "No, thank you, Brenda." "This is perfect, Esther," replied, her voice smooth and even, giving no indication she'd noticed the microaggression. She turned her attention to her tablet, where a complex spreadsheet of risk analysis for a new green hydrogen project awaited her review. The $5 billion figure wasn't just a number. It was a complex web of investments, partnerships, and infrastructure commitments, one of which involved a major logistics and shipping expansion in partnership with Transatlantic Airways cargo division. The deal was set to be finalized in London. The boarding process continued. The low hum of conversations, the clicking of overhead bins, the rustle of coats and bags. Esther was absorbed in her work, her mind tracing the flow of capital, assessing potential yields, and flagging regulatory hurdles. The drone of the cabin was just white noise. That is, until a new sound cut through it, a man's voice loud and laced with an aggrieved entitlement. Excuse me, I think there's been a mistake. Esther didn't look up immediately. It was a common enough occurrence. But the voice grew louder, closer. This is my seat. 2A. Esther slowly raised her eyes from the tablet. Standing in the aisle was a man in his late 30s. He wore a rumpled off-the-rack suit, and his face was flushed a mixture of haste and indignation. He clutched a boarding pass in his hand, thrusting it forward like a weapon. Brenda, the flight attendant, scurried over her expression, one of practiced concern. What seems to be the problem, sir? The problem, the man said, pointing a finger directly at Esther, is that this woman is in my seat. Esther calmly placed her tablet on the console beside her. She looked at the man, then at Brenda. She held up her own boarding pass, which was resting neatly beside her water. My boarding pass says 2A, she said, her voice steady. Brenda took the man's pass and glanced at it. Then she looked at Esther's. A small frown line appeared between her eyebrows. Oh, it seems we have a double booking. I am so sorry about this, sir. Let me see what's going on. The man who Esther would later learn was named Chad Covington, a mid-level sales director for a pharmaceutical company. Crossed his arms. Well, I'm a Platinum Elite member. I booked this seat 6 months ago. There shouldn't be a what's going on. She needs to move. The pronoun hung in the air, heavy and loaded. She. Brenda turned to Esther, her professional smile now strained. Ma'am, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. It looks like there's been a system glitch. We do have another seat for you in row 12. Row 12 wasn't in first class. It was a standard seat in premium economy. Esther's gaze didn't waver. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't moved a muscle. But a sudden chill seemed to emanate from her seat. There must be a misunderstanding. I am in the correct ticketed seat. Perhaps you could find another seat for this gentleman, Chad Covington scoffed. Unbelievable. Look, I have a very important meeting in London. I'm a Platinum member. What's her status? He demanded of Brenda, gesturing at Esther as if she wasn't there. Brenda's eyes darted nervously between the two. The path of least resistance was clear in her mind. On one side was an indignant, loud white man who was already making a scene. On the other was a quiet, poised black woman. The airline's training, both formal and informal, had subconsciously prepared her for this exact scenario. De-escalate. Appease the loudest voice. Ma'am, Brenda said, her tone shifting from apologetic to firm. We need to resolve this, so we can depart on time. The system has assigned the seat to Mr. Covington here. I'm going to have to ask you to gather your things. Esther took a slow, deliberate breath. This was no longer about a seat. It was about principle. It was about the 1,000 tiny cuts she and millions like her endured every day. The assumptions, the dismissals, the quiet, corrosive prejudice that demanded she shrink herself to make others comfortable. Brenda Esther said, her voice dropping to a low, resonant register that made the flight attendant flinch. I am not moving from this seat. Please get your gate supervisor. We can look at the booking records. My ticket was confirmed 2 weeks ago by my office as part of a corporate travel package. A very, very significant corporate travel package. The mention of a corporate package gave Brenda a moment's pause, but Chad's impatient huffing quickly erased it. She's refusing to move. Are you going to do something or not? Brenda made her choice. Ma'am, if you refuse to cooperate, I will have to consider you a non-compliant passenger. That is a serious issue. The threat was now unveiled. It was the nuclear option in airline parlance. Esther simply stared back at her. I am a fully compliant passenger in my ticketed seat. The non-compliant party is the airline which has failed to manage its booking system. Get your supervisor. From a few rows back, a young woman, a journalism student named Sarah, had discreetly angled her phone. She'd seen this kind of thing before, but the quiet, unshakable dignity of the woman in 2A was something new. She pressed record. The world needed to see this. Mark Peterson, the gate supervisor, arrived with an air of harried importance. He was a man who saw his job not as customer service, but as human logistics. Passengers were cargo with opinions, and his primary function was to get the plane pushed back from the gate on schedule. Delays meant paperwork, and Mark hated paperwork. Brenda quickly briefed him in hushed, urgent tones, framing the narrative before Esther could speak. Refusing to move, causing a delay. Claims her ticket is valid, but his is too. He's platinum elite. Mark nodded, his face already set in a mask of managerial resolve. He approached seat 2A, not looking at Esther directly, but at a point just over her head. Ma'am, Mark Peterson, I'm the supervisor for this flight. We have an unfortunate double booking situation. Mr. Covington here has priority status, and the system has allocated him this seat. We have a very nice seat for you in premium economy, and we can offer you a $300 flight voucher for the inconvenience. He said it all in a rushed monotone, as if he were reciting a script he'd used 100 times. He finally made eye contact, clearly expecting his authority, and the offer of a voucher to be the end of it. Esther met his gaze. The calm was still there, but now it was crystalline, hard as a diamond. Mr. Peterson, let me be very clear. I will not be moving to premium economy. I will not be accepting a voucher for an error made by your airline. I am seated in 2A, the seat assigned to me on the ticket I paid for through my corporate account. You are welcome to check the timestamp on the booking. I'm quite confident you will find my confirmation predates his. Chad Covington threw his hands up in theatrical despair. Oh, for God's sake, just get her out of here. I have to prepare for my meeting. Mark's patience, already thin, snapped. The schedule was everything. This woman with her quiet defiance was a wrench in his well-oiled machine. Ma'am, he said, his voice hardening, losing all pretense of customer service. The pilot has been informed of the situation. We are on the verge of a significant delay that will impact everyone on this plane. You have two options. You can accept the seat in row 12, or you can deplane. A collective gasp rippled through the first-class cabin. The other passengers who had been trying to mind their own business were now staring openly. They saw a well-dressed, composed black woman being threatened with removal, while a petulant, red-faced man stood fuming in the aisle. Esther felt a slow burning fire ignite in her chest. She had managed multi-billion-dollar mergers with more grace than these two airline employees could muster over a single seat. The sheer, unadulterated incompetence was galling. The underlying prejudice was infuriating. So I am to be punished for your clerical error, she stated, not as a question, but as a fact. Call it what you want, ma'am. Mark retorted, his face now a blotchy red. But a decision needs to be made. Now. Then the decision is this, Esther said, her voice ringing with clarity. I will be staying in the seat I paid for. If you wish to remove me, you will have to do it by force. And I promise you, Mr. Peterson, you will regret that decision for the rest of your professional career. It was not a threat made in anger. It was a statement of future fact. It was a prophecy. Mark Peterson, however, was not a man who dealt in prophecies. He dealt in schedules. He heard only defiance. He turned to Brenda. "Call security." Brenda's eyes widened for a second. This was escalating far beyond what she had anticipated. But she had hitched her wagon to Mark's authority. She nodded and picked up the cabin intercom. Her voice trembled slightly as she requested airport security to board the aircraft to deal with a non-compliant passenger in first class. The word sent another shockwave through the cabin. Sarah, the student, zoomed in her phone's camera, her heart pounding. This was it, the moment of truth. 2 Port Authority officers came aboard. They were large men, their faces impassive, their movements practiced. Mark pointed toward Esther. "This woman is refusing to vacate her seat and is holding up the flight. She needs to be removed." One of the officers, a man with a graying mustache and weary eyes, approached Esther. "Ma'am, you heard the supervisor. I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." Esther looked at the officer. Then she looked at Mark, at Brenda, and at Chad, who was now smirking with triumph. She had given them every chance to be reasonable, to be professional. They had chosen this path. "I will not be walking," she said softly. The officer sighed. "Ma'am, please don't make this difficult. You are the ones making this difficult," she replied, her voice still even. She gripped the armrests. The 2 officers exchanged a look. They had their orders. One took her left arm, the other her right. Esther did not struggle, but she did not assist. She became dead weight, a silent, powerful protest. As they began to pull her from the plush leather seat, her bag slipped to the floor, spilling some of its contents. A pen, a tube of lipstick, and a slim black leather business card holder. It fell open. The officer with the mustache glanced down. The card on top was embossed in elegant silver lettering. Dr. Esther Reed, CEO, Ethelred Capital. The officer paused for a half-second. The name meant nothing to him but CEO registered. He looked back at Mark Peterson, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. But Mark just gestured impatiently. "Get on with it." They lifted her, a woman of immense power and influence, being physically hauled from her seat like a common criminal. Her shoes scraped against the carpet. The humiliation was absolute, public, and searing. The other passengers watched in a mixture of horror, pity, and discomfort. Sarah's phone captured every second of it. The grim determination on the officers' faces, the smug look on Chad's, and the incredible, unbreakable poise on Dr. Esther Reed's face. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her expression was one of profound, chilling serenity. It was the face of a queen being led from her throne, already calculating the destruction of the kingdom that had betrayed her. As they dragged her past Chad Covington, he leaned in and sneered softly. "Should have just moved, sweetie." Esther turned her head, her eyes locking with his for a single, terrifying moment. And in that moment, Chad felt a cold dread snake up his spine. The look in her eyes wasn't anger. It was the dispassionate gaze of an astronomer watching a distant star collapse into a black hole, an inevitable and catastrophic event that she was powerless to stop, but had now set in motion. They pulled her out into the jet bridge, the sterile, impersonal tube that now felt like the world's most lonely place. The doors to the aircraft hissed shut behind her. The indignity was complete. The injustice was done. The fuse had just been lit. The jet bridge was cold. The institutional grey of the walls and the industrial carpeting absorbed all warmth, all sound. The two Port Authority officers stood a few feet away, suddenly looking awkward, their job done. One of them had picked up her bag and now held it out to her. "Your bag, ma'am." Esther took it without a word. Her silk blouse was rumpled, her dignity wounded, but her composure was a fortress. She straightened her clothes, her movements deliberate and controlled. The fire she felt was not a wildfire of rage, but a controlled, clean-burning fusion reaction, generating immense, focused energy. She unzipped a side pocket of her bag and retrieved her phone. Her hands were perfectly steady. She found the contact she needed: Alex Vance. Her executive assistant, a man so efficient, he seemed to operate in a different dimension of time. He would be awake. He was always on her time zone, no matter where in the world she was. He answered on the first ring. "Esther, is the Wi-Fi up already?" "I have the preliminary schematics for the Rotterdam port," Alex Esther said. Her voice was flat, devoid of its usual warmth. It was the voice she used when a company's board was about to be liquidated. The change in tone was immediate. Alex's voice sharpened. "What's wrong?" "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said, the words tasting like ash. "I've been removed from TAA Flight 88. A stunned silence on the other end of the line. For Alex Vance, a man who had choreographed her life with military precision for a decade, this was an impossible data point. It did not compute. Removed. "What do you mean, removed?" "A mechanical issue?" "No," Esther replied, her gaze fixed on the closed aircraft door. "I was forcibly removed by security because of a double-booked seat. A Mr. Chad Covington Platinum Elite member wanted my seat. Your team can find out where he works." The flight crew, a flight attendant named Brenda Jenkins and a supervisor named Mark Peterson, decided I was the more disposable passenger. She could hear Alex typing furiously in the background. He was already building a file. "Are you pressing charges? I'll have Maria Sanchez on the next flight out there. We can get the Port Authority incident report." "No," Esther interrupted. The legal fight was a skirmish. She was preparing for total war. "Not yet. First, we cauterize the wound. Are you at your desk?" "Of course." "Good. Open the Ethelred TAA consolidated file." Another pause, this one filled with dawning comprehension. "Esther, you can't mean—" "I mean exactly what you think I mean." "Alex," she said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper, "the $5 billion infrastructure and logistics deal we were to finalize in London, the one with Transatlantic Airways." "Yes." "Kill it." The words were so simple, so final. "Kill it. Not postpone, not renegotiate. Kill it. Erase it from existence." Alex was silent for a full 3 seconds. He understood the scale of what she was ordering. This wasn't just a contract. It was a strategic partnership, years in the making. It involved dozens of subcontractors, government permits, and a cascade of dependent investments. Unwinding it would be like unscrambling an egg with a sledgehammer. The shockwaves would be immense. "The kill clause requires a 24-hour notice of termination for breach of partner conduct." Alex said, his voice now the pure, uninflected tone of an executioner. "What is the stated reason for the breach?" Esther looked at her reflection in the dark window of the jet bridge. She saw the powerful CEO of Ethelred Capital, a woman who commanded legions in the financial world, standing alone and disheveled after being manhandled over a $10,000 seat. "State the reason as follows," she said, her voice like cracking ice. failure to guarantee the physical safety and contractual rights of key personnel. Add a sub-clause, citing a complete and catastrophic failure of corporate-level service and a discriminatory incident against the CEO of this firm, rendering all trust and future partnership untenable. She heard more typing. A mouse click. The termination notice has been sent to the office of Damien Thorne, CEO of Transatlantic Airways, and to their entire board of directors and general counsel. It is time-stamped as of this moment, Alex reported. It will hit their servers in Berlin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's sent. Good, Esther said. Now phase 2. I want you to draft a memo. Send it to the CEOs of every company in our portfolio, all 150 of them. Inform them that Ethelred Capital is immediately divesting from Transatlantic Airways and will be terminating our corporate travel accounts worldwide, effective immediately. Advise them as their lead investor and partner to re-evaluate their own relationship with TAA, citing significant concerns about their operational integrity and customer treatment at the highest levels. This was the masterstroke. This wasn't just Esther pulling her money. This was her calling on her empire to do the same. It was a quiet declaration of excommunication. That will trigger a market panic, Esther Alex warned, not questioning her, but ensuring she understood the fallout. That is the intention, she replied coldly. I want Damien Thorne to wake up to a 5-alarm fire. I want his stock to be worthless by the time the market opens in New York. I want every single person on that flight, from the pilot to the man in my seat, to understand what they did today. She took a deep breath. Book me a room at the TWA Hotel, the best suite they have, and charter a private jet to London. I still have a meeting to get to. Just not with TAA. It's done, Alex said. A Gulfstream GC650 will be ready at the private aviation terminal in 90 minutes. A car is waiting for you at arrivals. The hotel is confirmed. Thank you, Alex. She hung up. The deed was done. The mechanism was in motion. $5 billion, a sum so vast it was almost abstract, had just been vaporized from TAA's future because of Brenda, Mark, and Chad. They had no idea. They were still taxiing to the runway, feeling smug and victorious. They thought they had won a battle over a seat. Esther Reed had just launched a war that would burn their entire world to the ground. She turned and walked away from the closed aircraft door, her heels clicking with quiet purpose on the floor of the jet bridge. She didn't look back. Meanwhile, somewhere over the Atlantic, Sarah, the journalism student, connected to the plane's spotty Wi-Fi. The video she had taken was shaky, the audio muffled by the cabin noise. But the images were brutally clear, a calm, elegant black woman being forcibly dragged from her seat by 2 large officers. She typed out a simple caption. Transatlantic Airways just dragged this woman off Flight 88 because a white man wanted her first-class seat. This is insane. TAA. Flying. While black. She hit post. The video, a tiny packet of digital information, shot up to a satellite and then beamed back down to Earth. It landed on the internet with the silence of a single snowflake. But it was the snowflake that would start an avalanche. Damien Thorne, the CEO of Transatlantic Airways, believed the world was his chessboard. He was a man of tailored suits, aggressive expansion strategies, and a profound conviction that any problem could be solved with the right combination of money and public relations. His office on the top floor of TAA Tower in London was a glass-walled monstrosity overlooking the city a testament to his perceived mastery over the globe. He was pouring himself a celebratory glass of Macallan 25 when his private line buzzed. It was an obnoxious, jarring sound he reserved for Tier 1 emergencies. He scowled, glancing at the clock. It was just after midnight in London. Who would be calling now? He saw the call was from his head of PR, a perpetually panicked man named David Chen. "David, this better be important." Damien snapped into the speakerphone. "Damien, have you seen Twitter?" David's voice was strained, high-pitched. "I don't see Twitter." "David, I have people for that." "What is it? Did one of our celebrity spokespeople say something stupid again?" "It's worse. Much worse. A video. Flight 88, JFK to Heathrow. It's not good." Damien sighed, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. How not good? A passenger being belligerent. A passenger being removed. A black woman. From first class. The optics are Damien. They are catastrophic. The video has 1 million views already, and it's only been an hour. Flying. While black is the #1 trending topic in the United States, and our airline is the star of the show. Damien's hand paused. This was more than a nuisance. This was a headache. Okay, what's the story from our side? Was she drunk? A security threat? That's the problem. The video shows her being completely calm. The narrative online is that she was removed to give her seat to a white man. It's a racial incident, Damien. A really, really bad one. Damien took a long sip of his scotch. He could already see the playbook. Issue a formal apology. Stress commitment to diversity. Fire the low-level employees involved. Throw some money at a diversity-focused charity. The storm would pass. It always did. All right, David, get on it. Draft a statement. We're deeply concerned. We're launching a full investigation. Find out the names of the flight attendant and supervisor involved. We'll suspend them pending the investigation. Leak it to the press that they've been fired. That'll feed the beast for a day or two. Right, Damien. On it. Just as David was about to hang up, Damien's desktop pinged with an urgent email notification. It was flagged with the highest possible priority, routed directly from his chief legal officer. The subject line was a single, terrifying phrase. Notice of termination. Ethelred Capital. Damien's blood ran cold. Ethelred Capital was not just another partner. They were the partner. The $5 billion logistics deal was the cornerstone of TAA's next decade of growth. It was his legacy project, the move that would cement his reputation as a visionary. David. Hold on. Damien said, his voice suddenly tight. He clicked open the email. He read the cold, legalistic prose. Breach of partner conduct. Failure to guarantee safety and contractual rights. Catastrophic failure of corporate-level service. Discriminatory incident against the CEO of this firm. The glass nearly slipped from his hand. The CEO of Ethelred Capital. He scrambled to his keyboard, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. He typed CEO Ethelred Capital into a search engine. The first result was a photo of Dr. Esther Reed, a poised, intelligent-looking black woman. He had seen her picture before in profiles in the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. He had never met her, but he knew who she was. Everyone knew who she was. He felt a wave of nausea. He looked at the trending video on a news site David had sent him. He watched the shaky footage of the calm, dignified woman being hauled out of her seat. It was her. It was Dr. Esther Reed. "Oh my God," Damien whispered, sinking into his leather chair. The scotch suddenly tasted like poison. This wasn't a random passenger. This wasn't a PR problem he could manage with a statement and a scapegoat. They hadn't just mistreated a customer. They had assaulted the queen of a financial empire that was intimately and catastrophically entangled with his own. David Damien said, his voice a strangled croak. "Are you still there?" "Yes, Damien." "Forget the statement. Get the legal team. Get the board. Get everyone, now. We have a DEFCON 1 situation. What is it? What's happened?" The woman in the video. Damien said, his mind racing, trying to calculate the scale of the disaster. It was like trying to calculate infinity. She's the CEO of Ethelred Capital. The silence on David's end was absolute. He understood. The $5 billion deal. The stock price. The investor confidence. The house of cards that Damien had built so carefully was about to be hit by a hurricane named Esther Reed. "Damien," David finally stammered. "What have we done?" "Damien." Thorne didn't answer. He was staring at the termination notice again, at the cold final words. He thought of his employees. Brenda Jenkins, Mark Peterson. They had been following protocol, or what they thought was protocol. They had been trying to ensure an on-time departure. For that, they had just detonated a financial nuclear bomb in the heart of the company they worked for. And then he thought of the man in the video, the smug passenger who had taken her seat. Chad Covington. Who the hell was Chad Covington? In that moment, Damien Thorne hated Chad Covington with a passion he had previously reserved only for his biggest corporate rivals. The phone rang again. It was his CFO. "Damien, did you see the Ethelred notice? What the hell is going on?" "The pre-market trading in New York is... it's a bloodbath. We're already down 15%. Damien closed his eyes. It was just the beginning. The avalanche was starting its descent, and they were standing right at the bottom of the mountain. He had built a palace of cards, and 2 of his lowest-ranking employees had just pulled out the ace of spades. The sun had not yet risen over New York City, but Wall Street was already wide awake and drenched in a cold sweat. The news of Ethelred Capital's termination of its TAA partnership had spread through the financial world's nervous system like a potent neurotoxin. Pre-market indicators showed TAA's stock ticker symbol TLA in free fall. It wasn't just a dip, it was a swan dive off a cliff. By the time the opening bell rang at the New York Stock Exchange, the carnage began in earnest. TLA opened down 28%. Traders were screaming sell orders into their phones. Automated trading algorithms programmed to react to catastrophic news and social media sentiment were dumping millions of shares per second. The video of Esther Reed's removal was now playing on a loop on every major news network. The hashtag wasn't just trending, it was a global phenomenon. In her suite at the TWA Hotel, Esther Reed watched the financial news channels with a dispassionate eye, sipping a cup of black coffee. She was already dressed in a fresh, immaculate suit, ready for her chartered flight. She felt no joy, no schadenfreude. This was not revenge. It was a consequence. It was a market correction for an injustice. Her phone buzzed. It was Alex. Phase 2 is having the desired effect, he said. The memo to our portfolio companies has caused a chain reaction. Oracle Salesforce and a dozen other tech giants have announced they are suspending their corporate accounts with TAA pending a review. The cumulative value of those accounts is estimated at over $800 million annually. Good, Esther said simply. Also, we got the details on Chad Covington. Alex continued. Sales director at Viridian Pharmaceuticals, mid-level. It seems his claim to platinum elite status was through his company's corporate account. Viridian's CEO Robert Maxwell is on the board of a charity you co-founded. Esther allowed herself a small, grim smile. The world was smaller than people thought. I'm sure Robert will be interested to learn how his employee represents his company abroad. I've already taken the liberty of forwarding him the video link with a polite non-committal note, Alex said. And the personnel files for Brenda Jenkins and Mark Peterson are on your secure server. Jenkins has 2 prior passenger complaints filed against her, for rude behavior both dismissed. Peterson has a reputation for prioritizing on-time departures above all else, with several internal memos commending him for it. It seems TAA cultivated the very culture that led to this. This was the final piece for Esther. It wasn't just a few rogue employees. It was the system. The airline had rewarded the very behavior that led to its downfall. Across the Atlantic, Damien Thorne's world was imploding. In a frantic emergency board meeting, he tried to project calm, but the sweat beading on his forehead betrayed his terror. We issue a full, unreserved apology to Dr. Reed, he said, his voice strained. A personal apology from me. We fire the employees involved publicly. We announce a new multi-million-dollar diversity and inclusion initiative. We can contain this. An elderly, formidable woman on the board, Lady Anne Covington, a cruel irony of name fixed him with a steely glare. Damien, you are not comprehending the scale of this. This is not about containment. Ethelred has already pulled out. The stock has lost 1/3 of its value in an hour, wiping out nearly $4 billion in market capitalization. $4 billion. We are not containing a fire. We are standing in the ashes. Damien's phone buzzed with a message from David Chen. He glanced at it. It's getting worse. Viridian Pharmaceuticals just issued a press release. They have terminated Chad Covington for conduct grossly in violation of our corporate ethics and are also suspending their TAA account. He's become the public face of the entitled villain. Karma was moving with brutal efficiency. Chad Covington, who had smugly taken his seat for an important meeting, had just been fired before his plane even landed. When he switched on his phone at Heathrow, he would discover he was not only unemployed, but was now one of the most hated men on the internet. For Brenda Jenkins and Mark Peterson, the news came via a cold, impersonal phone call from TAA Human Resources. They were fired effective immediately for gross misconduct. Their security badges were deactivated. In a single morning, their decades of service were erased. Brenda sat in her small suburban home, watching herself on the news, a villain in a story she thought she was managing. Mark Peterson stared at his termination email, his mind unable to process how his obsession with on-time departures had led to professional ruin. They were the scapegoats Damien needed, but their sacrifice was a drop in a burning ocean. Damien Thorne, desperate, decided to take matters into his own hands. He got Esther Reed's contact information from a mutual acquaintance and called her directly. He expected her assistant, but was shocked when she answered herself. Dr. Reed. He began, his voice oozing a practiced corporate humility. Damien Thorne. I cannot begin to express how profoundly sorry I am. What happened was inexcusable, a complete failure on our part. I have fired the employees responsible, and I want to personally apologize for the disgusting treatment you received." There was a moment of silence on the line. Then Esther's voice, cold and clear as a glacier. "Mr. Thorne, was I the first black person your airline has ever mistreated, or just the first one with the power to make you regret it?" The question stunned him into silence. It wasn't a question he could answer. If he said yes, he was a liar. If he said no, he was admitting to a systemic problem. "Your apology is noted," Esther continued, not waiting for his response. "It is also irrelevant. This is no longer a customer service issue. This is a matter of corporate governance and fiduciary duty. Your company's culture created the conditions for this event. Your stock price today is not a reaction to a viral video. It is a market re-evaluation of your company's inherent risk. You have proven to be an unstable and untrustworthy partner. Ethelred Capital does not invest in instability. Goodbye." She hung up. Damien Thorne held the dead phone to his ear. He had offered an apology, and she had countered with a corporate death sentence. She wasn't angry at his employees. She had indicted his entire philosophy. The ripple effect continued. Other airlines, seeing TAA's vulnerability, began aggressively targeting their corporate clients. Travel agencies started advising clients against flying TAA, citing the ongoing reputational crisis. The pilot of Flight 88, who had authorized Esther's removal to avoid a delay, landed at Heathrow to find a phalanx of reporters waiting for him. He was whisked away by airline security, his career now permanently tainted. The story had reached its logical conclusion. An act of prejudice had been met with overwhelming financial force. The guilty parties had been punished. The mighty had been humbled. But Esther Reed wasn't finished. Pulling the funding was just the first step. Humiliating Damien Thorne was a byproduct. She was a builder, not a destroyer. But to build something new, you first had to clear the rotted foundations of the old. And she had a suspicion that the rot at Transatlantic Airways went much, much deeper than a single incident of discrimination. She called Alex again. "Alex," she said, as her Gulf Stream began its powerful ascent into the sky. "I want you to hire the best forensic accounting and corporate investigation firm you can find. I want them to dig into every corner of Transatlantic Airways. Safety records, maintenance logs, SEC filings, everything. Mr. Thorne thinks this is about an apology. I want to show him what this is really about." Esther was about to turn a PR crisis into an existential one. The hard karma was just getting started. While the world was fixated on the dramatic public execution of Transatlantic Airways' reputation, Esther Reed was moving in the shadows. The firm she hired, a discreet but ruthless group of forensic investigators, led by a former DOJ prosecutor named Benjamin Carter, began its work with chilling efficiency. They weren't looking for another PR scandal. They were looking for structural felonies. Carter's team of accountants and ex-intelligence analysts descended on TAA's public records like piranhas on a wounded animal. They combed through years of SEC filings, shareholder reports, and International Aviation Authority disclosures. They cross-referenced maintenance schedules with flight logs and expense reports with parts acquisitions. 3 weeks after the incident on Flight 88, Esther was in her London office when Carter requested an urgent encrypted video call. When his face appeared on her screen, it was grim. Dr. Reed Carter began foregoing pleasantries. "We found it." Found what Ben Esther asked, leaning forward. "It's in their maintenance division. specifically with their fleet of Boeing 707s, the workhorse of their long-haul routes. About 3 years ago, Damien Thorne brought in a new COO, a man named Jeffrey Lang. Lang's mandate was aggressive cost-cutting. His specialty was operational streamlining. Carter put a document up on the screen. It was a complex chart mapping maintenance cycles. According to FAA and EASA regulations, Carter explained certain critical components like turbine blades in the engines require inspection or replacement after a set number of flight hours. It's called an A check or a more intensive C check. These checks are expensive. They take a plane out of service cost millions in parts and labor. And Lang streamlined them, Esther surmised. Worse, Carter said. He didn't just streamline them. He created a system to circumvent them. TAA began outsourcing some of their C-checks to a third-party maintenance facility in a country with lax regulatory oversight. This facility would sign off on the work, certifying that components had been replaced, but our financial forensics show that TAA was not purchasing a corresponding number of new parts from the manufacturers like General Electric or Rolls-Royce. Esther felt a knot tighten in her stomach. They were falsifying the records. That's the hypothesis Carter confirmed. They were pencil-whipping the inspections. The facility would sign the paperwork, saying a full C-check was done a $20 million job. But they were probably only doing a basic A-check, a $2 million job, and pocketing the difference with TAA executives getting kickbacks. They were flying planes with components that were long past their mandated service life. They were gambling with hundreds of lives on every single flight to save a few $1 million. This was it. This was the unseen rot. The racism Esther experienced wasn't an isolated flaw. It was a symptom of a corporate culture that cut corners, that prioritized profit over people, whether it was a passenger's dignity or an engine's integrity. "Do you have proof?" Esther asked, her voice low. "We have a mountain of circumstantial evidence. The discrepancy between parts purchases and maintenance logs is a smoking gun for any investigator. But we need a whistleblower. Someone on the inside to confirm it." "Find one," Esther ordered. Carter's team used their network of contacts to quietly put out feelers. They focused on recently laid off or disgruntled TAA mechanics and engineers. Within a week, they got a hit. A senior TAA maintenance engineer, a man named David O'Connell, who had been forced into early retirement for not being a team player after he raised concerns about the new maintenance protocols. O'Connell, his career in ruins and his conscience heavy, agreed to talk. In a secure location, he laid it all out for Carter's team, providing internal memos and emails that backed up his claims. He described how Jeffrey Lang and other executives had pressured engineers to sign off on incomplete inspections. He even had a name for the program, Project Nightingale, a sickeningly poetic name for a conspiracy that was putting thousands of lives at risk. The evidence was now ironclad. It was a bombshell. This went far beyond a corporate lawsuit. This was criminal. Esther now had a choice. She could leak it to the press, destroying TAA completely and instantly. But that felt too chaotic, too vengeful. Her goal was not just to punish, but to enact a righteous, orderly consequence. She instructed her legal team, led by Maria Sanchez, to compile the entire dossier, the forensic accounting Carter's investigation, and David O'Connell's sworn testimony. They packaged it perfectly complete with appendices, exhibits, and a cover letter. The package was not sent to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. It was sent simultaneously to two places the US Department of Justice and the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, EASA. She was handing the weapon to the authorities. She wasn't just an angry CEO anymore. She was a citizen reporting a massive, dangerous crime that threatened public safety on a global scale. Damien Thorne thought his nightmare was over. TAA's stock had stabilized, albeit at a catastrophically low value. He had weathered the initial storm. He was in the painful process of trying to rebuild. He had no idea that a far greater storm, a perfect storm, was about to make landfall. He had no idea that his decision to save a few million on engine parts was about to cost him his liberty. The hard karma was no longer just financial. It was about to become very, very real. 2 weeks later, on a clear Tuesday afternoon, it happened. Transatlantic Airways Flight 112, a Boeing 707, with 312 souls on board, was 4 hours out of Chicago, over the vast, empty expanse of the North Atlantic. In the cockpit, the pilots were monitoring their instruments, the flight smooth and routine. Without warning, a deafening explosion rocked the aircraft. A violent shudder ran through the entire airframe. Alarms blared in the cockpit, a cacophony of urgent synthesized warnings. The number 2 engine, the one on the right wing, had failed catastrophically. But it hadn't just failed. It had disintegrated. A fan blade, stressed far beyond its engineered lifespan, had broken off at 38,000 feet. The shard of metal spinning at thousands of RPM shredded the inside of the engine, cowling like a bomb. Shrapnel tore through the wing itself, severing hydraulic lines and puncturing the fuel tank. Inside the cabin, passengers screamed as the plane lurched violently, dropping several thousand feet before the pilots could wrestle it back under control. A flight attendant who was in the galley was thrown against the ceiling, breaking her arm. Those who dared to look out the right side windows saw a terrifying sight. The engine was a mangled wreck, trailing smoke and spewing hydraulic fluid into the slipstream. The pilots, battling a cascade of system failures, declared a mayday. They were losing fuel and hydraulics. They needed to land. Now. They diverted to the nearest suitable airport, Shannon, Ireland. For the next 90 minutes, the pilots fought to keep the crippled giant in the sky. It was a masterpiece of airmanship, a battle of human skill against corporate negligence. They made it. The plane slammed onto the runway at Shannon Airport, tires screeching, one wing heavy and damaged. Emergency vehicles swarmed the aircraft as it skidded to a stop. The passengers, weeping and terrified, were evacuated via emergency slides. Miraculously, aside from a few minor injuries and the flight attendant's broken arm, everyone was alive. They had come within a hair's breadth of disaster. The news of the near catastrophe on Flight 112 was the lead story everywhere. But this time, it was different. This wasn't a PR crisis. It was a federal case. The day after the incident, the DOJ and EASA unsealed their investigation, acting on the dossier Esther Reed had provided. The timing was impeccable, the cause and effect brutally clear. Federal agents raided TAA's headquarters in London and its operations center in New York simultaneously. They seized servers, documents, and computers. The COO, Jeffrey Lang, was arrested at his Connecticut home while he was still in his pajamas. The final crushing blow came for Damien Thorne. He was in a meeting trying to spin the Shannon incident as a testament to the skill of our pilots, when 2 FBI agents and a US Marshal walked into the boardroom. Damien Thorne, one of the agents said, flashing a badge. Damien stood up, his face pale. Yes, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, endangerment of aircraft, and obstruction of justice. The click of the handcuffs snapping onto Damien Thorne's wrists echoed in the silent boardroom. The man who had sat atop a global empire, who had dismissed Dr. Reed as a PR nuisance, was now a common criminal, his legacy not one of vision, but of greed and corruption. His face as he was led away in a perp walk past a throng of news cameras was a mask of utter devastation. The karma was complete and devastatingly specific. For Damien Thorne, he was denied bail. Facing decades in prison, his personal fortune was frozen to pay for what would become the largest fine in aviation history. He lost everything: his company, his reputation, his freedom. For Chad Covington, the man who started it all was a pariah. Fired from his job, his name became a meme for entitled prejudice. He was unable to find work in his field. A legal firm specializing in class action lawsuits found several other passengers from Flight 88 who testified to his aggressive and entitled behavior, making him a key witness for the prosecution against TAA, forcing him to publicly relive his shame. For Brenda Jenkins and Mark Peterson, though fired, they were subpoenaed to testify against TAA. Their testimony, detailing the corporate culture of prioritizing schedules and appeasing certain demographics over others, became a key part of the prosecution's narrative about the company's corrupt soul. They avoided jail time, but would never work in the airline industry again, their names synonymous with the scandal. For Transatlantic Airways, the airline was finished. Grounded by the FAA and EASA, its stock fell to zero and was delisted. It filed for bankruptcy within the month. Its assets were sold off for parts. The once proud airline, a giant of the skies, was erased from existence, a case study in business schools for generations to come on how corporate rot, starting with a single act of prejudice, can bring down an empire. In the aftermath, Esther Reed never gloated. She didn't have to. The world saw her not as a vengeful CEO, but as a hero whose actions averted a tragedy and forced sweeping reforms across the aviation industry. Her investigation, credited with saving hundreds of lives, had exposed a rot that went far beyond prejudice. The reclaimed $5 billion was not merely reallocated. Esther established the Phoenix Fund, a venture dedicated to building safer, more equitable transportation. Its first investment was Aura Airlines, a new carrier rising from the ashes of TAA's disgrace, founded on a culture of transparency and respect. Months later, Dr. Reed sat in seat 2A of Aura's inaugural flight. She looked out at the clear sky, reflecting on the journey. A single ugly moment of discrimination had led to the dismantling of a corrupt empire and the creation of something better. She had demanded respect, and in doing so, proved that true power wasn't about revenge, but about righteous, transformative change. The sky and the industry that flew through it was finally safer for everyone. And that's where our story ends. Not with a bang, but with the quiet hum of a new beginning. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the most seemingly insignificant moments of injustice are symptoms of a much deeper disease. Dr. Esther Reed didn't just get mad. She got strategic. She used her power not just to tear down a corrupt system, but to build a better one in its place. This story shows that karma isn't always a mystical force. Sometimes it's a well-funded, meticulously executed plan for accountability. It's what happens when someone who is so often underestimated finally decides they will not be moved. What did you think of Esther's ultimate move? Was it justice or was it revenge? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe for more stories of epic consequences and hard-hitting karma. Thanks for listening.